What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another podcast. Today with Elliot Roe, who's considered as the most popular mindset coach for poker players. He's not only coaching poker players, but he's also coaching MMA fighters, any kind of high performance athletes, but also CEOs, traders, businessmen. He is, all around the world, and he has a very big reputation, and I've been working with him for quite some time. He always helped me a lot when I was in a downswing or when I didn't feel so well and I felt like I can't resolve it on my own. And he's going to be sharing his insights on how to resolve issues that are holding you back from achieving the results you desire, the happiness you desire, how you can let go of your tilt issues. And very much looking forward to that episode. So you better grab a carrot, you better take some notes, and then enjoy this episode. Elliot Roe today on the podcast. Very excited. We have been working together for a very long time. Has helped me to go through not only through downswings, but also some personal stuff that was holding me back in terms of my level of happiness, level of calmness. And you definitely need to have those people in your life, whether it's a mentor, whether it's a coach, whether it's friends. But with Elliot's expertise, I think it wouldn't. It's a no-brainer. It was a no-brainer for me. You got recommended from so many different friends, poker friends, from Fedor, and at some point, and I was always someone considered as, with my background, I'm not sure, coaches, mentors, just woo, some sort of stuff that they just try to take your money, but. And I think there's still a lot of black sheeps, but when you find the right ones, they can have a huge impact on your life. So thank you for that, and welcome today to the podcast.
Well, thanks for the kind introduction.
Yeah. So Elliot, you are someone who has been working with a lot of people, not only poker, but also outside of poker, right? I saw some stories. You have been working with MMA fighters. What is usually the typical group of people that you're working with? What's their sports background or professional background, or do you also coach businessmen? What is your field of expertise?
So really, I work with high performers.
Okay.
So whether it's I work with CEOs of companies, I work with traders on Wall Street, and I work with professional athletes in different sports. So I've worked with Olympians, I've worked with UFC fighters, I've worked with people in team sports. Really, the thing that connects everyone I work with is they're typically sort of top 100 in the world trying to reach top 10, or top 10 trying to reach number 1.
Okay.
So it's less about the activity that they're doing, and it's more about they're sort of at a very high level, and they're looking to refine even further to reach the very top of their potential.
That sounds very interesting. How did you get into that? How did this all started that you decided, all right, I want to become a mindset coach. I want to become a high performance coach?
It was interesting. At first, wasn't a direction I was expecting to go in at all. I had a fear of flying that was resolved by a hypnotherapist, and I really enjoyed the process. Because of that, I decided to go and get trained in hypnotherapy, and originally I was expecting it to just be a hobby. So, help friends and family out with
What
fears,
what age roughly was it?
Mid-20s, I guess. Something, so I guess for 27, something like that.
So 3 years ago, roughly.
I wish. I did that. Finished the course and started working with friends and family, and it went well. And they started recommending people, and I started working with just some people looking to improve their golf scores, and they were seeing changes in their golf scores. And one of my friends worked in the poker industry, and she said, hey, if you're helping people deal with the stress while they're putting, if you could help people on final tables, it might be worth a fortune to them. So sort of something clicked in my mind. I thought, oh, there could be a whole industry here to work with. And I just started offering free sessions to poker players. I think this was back in 2011.
Man, I missed some insane value.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was different. So yeah, 2011, started doing that, got good reviews, people started making more money, and then it snowballed in poker. And at the time I was living in Las Vegas, and I just went to the different UFC gyms and said, would you like me to do a free talk on mindset? And some of them said yes, and I picked up a number of UFC fighters.
So you approach the people, you just say, are you interested? I offer you something for free.
Yeah.
That's how it works, man. That's...
Yeah, so I offered free talks at the gyms. I had some background in MMA, so I knew people in the industry already, so I had some level of credibility there. Started working with UFC fighters, and then that went well. I ended up working with a couple of champions in the UFC. And from the poker and the UFC, people in other sports were getting recommended to me. And then also in poker, because I'm dealing with a lot of very high stakes players, they're friends with CEOs of companies, they're friends with stock market traders, they're friends with crypto people. So I started getting recommended in those industries as well. And from there, it's sort of all spread out. And as I say, the theme is that almost everyone is this sort of high performer looking to reach their full potential now.
Yeah. Is it very often... No, let me ask this first, man. I have so many questions. Insane. But you haven't had a poker background yourself, or did you also start playing? You never played?
So, I mean, I say never played. I played like with friends at home. So I understood how to play poker, but when it comes to the professionals, you know, I wouldn't consider myself a good poker player. I play, if I'm in Vegas, you know, I'm that level of poker player. Yeah. So I've never had the experience of playing in the massive tournaments or those sorts of things. But in the same way, you know, I've never traded on the stock market, and I've not fought for a UFC bout. Yeah. It's I have my niche that I specialize in.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, it is. I don't want to say it's always the same, but you can definitely see very identical patterns. Whether you are, I mean, since now we're in esports and so many different games, but in the end of the day, it's all about the pressure that people feel, how to deal with it, how to prepare. And it's not that different whether you're a poker player, you're an esports player, you're an MMA fighter, you're a businessman. You still have the same amount of pressure. You have to stay calm and relaxed when making decisions. You have to find a way to prepare yourself, to unwind. And I've realized the same when I'm working with my students, that very often the problems that they face at the poker tables are somewhat correlated with something that is going on in their lives or in the past. Yeah. And this is also something I'm trying to teach, that, yeah, you play poker, but don't just only focus at the game itself. You also need to look outside of the tables. You might have a look into your past. And I don't have the mindset background as you have, and there's so much more to learn. But I think there are some small steps everyone can take to maybe realize, and I think that's a very, very crucial step, to realize, oh, wait, it's coming from there. This very often, and when I was working for you and you told me, Ben, your issue, it's coming from there, that already helps. This is like 30-40% of the problem itself, and will make it so much better already. And then, of course, with the hypnotherapy and having my own little exercise that I'm doing, then it's doing the rest. But just realizing where some issues are coming from, whether it's tilt issues, whether it's anger issues, whatever it is, this is already a big part. And having someone telling you that, it's priceless, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of the things I find really interesting is it doesn't matter the industry. Yeah, I believe people bring their own problems to the industry. True. So in poker, you know, the player is bringing their issues to the poker table. The poker table isn't creating the issue. It's just amplifying it because it's highly emotional. Yeah. So if you're someone who's got some anger issues, poker's going to make you incredibly angry. If you have anxiety issues, if you have ego issues, if you have a fear of failure, if you have a fear of success, poker, because you're winning and losing money, is just going to amplify all of those things. So the process I use, which you'll be very aware of, is resolving those issues in the background, understanding what's going on and where it's coming from, so that they're not there for poker to trigger them in the same way, which is the opposite of focusing on the poker and hoping that that will then resolve the issues. Because as I say, I just see it very much that you're bringing it to the table, and therefore you need to solve the background problem rather than just the problems at the table.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy. Yeah, that the poker table is basically just amplifying the problems that you bring to the table. What would you, if you don't mind sharing, what would you think is the most common, one of the most common reasons why people have these anger problems, that they get very angry when things are not going well, facing bad beats? What is usually the reason where it's coming from?
Usually it's entitlement issues.
Okay.
So, especially if it's bad beats, they believe for whatever reason that if they get their money in good, they deserve to win. And they're viewing the game as a short-term game like chess or another sport, rather than viewing it as something where you're winning like a casino over a long period of time. So entitlement creates that, and then you need to look at where that entitlement comes from. And when I'm doing sessions with players, quite often they're going to have issues with feeling that they've been treated unfairly in life.
So during their childhood or somewhere in the past.
So, they were blamed for something they didn't do or whatever it might be. So there's this trigger in the background that things that are unfair are particularly painful for them. And then their races get cracked when they're deep in an MTT, and it's incredibly unfair to them, it feels. So it triggers this anger program, this anger cycle. And when it comes to unfairness, almost everyone has stories of things being unfair in their life, because life isn't fair.
True.
So it's why so many people see these problems. But I would say entitlement is typically the biggest factor when it comes to problems with bad beats.
Why is it so? Has always been something so astonishing to me, is something that happened so so far back, let's say when you're 10, 8, 9. Usually, from what I know, is the earlier, the younger we are, the bigger the impact can be. Like usually, the older we grow, we become more conscious of what is going on. But when we're 10 and less, we're more susceptible towards the inputs of our family. I have experienced the same. I think the stuff that we've been working on actually lies somewhere around when I was 10 and younger, where I'm so much more dependent on my parents, maybe teachers. And why do you think, or what is the reason? Why is that so impactful? Something that is 20 years ago, and today, there might be a situation where we got treated very, very unfair, and it was so painful for us when we were 8 or 7. And today we think, why? Like, that was not a big of a deal. But then there's this emotion still inside of us, somewhere deep down, that causes all this anger, entitlement, frustration, and all the, the actions or our reactions that we don't really necessarily enjoy, or we're not necessarily proud of. Why is it still so strong?
I believe it's evolutionary.
Okay.
So if you think about how children learn, it's important that we, as a child, if we're being brought up, especially, thousands of years ago, we do what we're told by our parents, and we trust that their view of the world is accurate and that it will keep us safe. So if we look at how phobias are created, typically a lot of phobias are created by overreaction of parents. So if we think of 10,000 years ago, a child isn't naturally scared of a tiger. A child becomes scared of a tiger by the overreaction of its mother.
Interesting.
So the mum starts screaming, grabs the child. This is now something that's dangerous that might kill me, and you're going to have a fear response from that. And it's the same with all fears and phobias. They're learned behaviors. You're learning that they're dangerous from somewhere. And you're also learning about yourself and how you fit in the world in the same way. So over those formative years, it's usually, up, like you say, sort of sub 10, usually past 7, it's not so bad, but it's usually sort of those sorts of years. You can pick up these programs of who you believe that you are as a person. And then you're running that program moving forward. And as you get older, things have to be much more traumatic to break into that program. So that's where you get things like PTSD is an adult basically reframing their beliefs about themselves and who they are and how dangerous the world is because something has been horrifically traumatic past that point.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about children, it doesn't have to be anything particularly traumatic. It can be a kid telling you that you're not good enough. It can be someone stealing your lunch. It can be your dad having a throwaway comment saying that he never wanted you. Something like that can stick with the child, and it can actually change the way the person sees themselves for the rest of their life if they never work on it.
Yeah.
And we're not usually consciously aware of these things, but it shows up in our behavior.
Yeah.
So, someone wonders why they're insecure and they're not sure why, and they feel good. And then there are these memories that will come up in sessions that start to explain that. And that's just a general theme that I see, is that those sorts of years are where we have the deep rooted programs and emotions, and then we're basically just repeating this program until there's something happens where it's time for a change, and you work on it very seriously.
And I realized when we've been working together, and I think that it can be quite painful going that far back. But very often where it's painful, it can have very often because we try to avoid that. We're like, that's not necessarily what we're proud of, and especially my generation, I feel like as a man, putting yourself in a very vulnerable position and going that deep and admitting that was hurtful, that was something that has impacted your life in a certain way, and you might cry like a little baby and you bring up all these old emotions. This is very uncomfortable and very painful, but afterwards it feels like you lost 10 kilos in weight, right? I had these conversations with my dad, and I think it's something, and I would say my childhood I was blessed. Like it's not that we're necessarily rich, but and it's not that you should be blaming your parents, but they don't know better, right? They are also, imagine you're 20, 22, 23, and you get a kid. You don't know shit.
You're not going to do it perfectly.
You don't know. Yeah, and that's the thing. I think, especially now with the access to technology, of course, with all the knowledge we can Google how to raise a child, right? Or we get access to some experts sharing their knowledge. 20, 30 years ago, it was not that easy. So they were basically raising their kids the way they have been taught from their parents. Now picture 70 years ago, the access to information and knowledge, right? So this also has helped me a lot to accept the fact that it was not perfect, but actually it was perfect, because I've learned from their mistakes as well. And I wouldn't be in the place today when they would have raised me in a different way, because I could learn from it. What would be your advice? Unless, sorry, if you want to share something and maybe you have a thought that you would like to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think the standout thing, you were mentioning how emotional could be covering these issues from the past. And really that's what we're looking for in the sessions, because it's that emotion that's trapped that's causing the problem currently. So I envision it, I imagine it as like a pressurized bottle that's inside, and we've trapped all of this emotion, and there's no reason in a lot of the situations, there's no reason for it to be particularly emotional. If you look back, I've literally had guys in their 60s crying over someone taking an apple from them at kindergarten.
Yeah.
That's not something that they, you would think would be traumatic, but they stored so much emotion from it.
We also have a different. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that it's still there, and it's when that's released, that's the release of that program, and sort of an understanding of things can be different now. Oh, I've been acting in this way because of this, and then once that happens, life can be easier. And as you say, it feels like a very big weight has come off.
Yeah. I think we also have a different perception of time, right? Something that with 5 today we think, what? No, why should it bother us, right? But when we're 5, it's a little
life and
different.
death.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's serious.
Yeah. What would you recommend to people that don't necessarily now have the money to spend on a mindset coach, or don't necessarily have someone in their lives that would serve them as a suitable partner for such a deep conversation? How could they start trying to work on these problems? And I don't like using the word fixing or optimizing, because I think we already have it within. We just need to bring it up and let go. So maybe more like accepting what happened, bringing up old stored emotions, dealing with them, just basically changing our relationship to them. What would your recommendation, like some practical advice to those people that cannot afford a mindset coach?
Yeah, I mean, first off, the thing I would do is start journaling. An exercise for doing this, which I find very powerful, is the person thinks about whatever it is they're struggling with.
Yeah.
So let's say it's anger entitlement issues at the poker table. So they bring that emotion up. So what does it feel like to you physically when your aces get cracked, if that's the thing that triggers you?
Yeah.
And typically, most people will have some level of physical symptom that they feel.
Yeah.
So I get really hot, or my chest gets constricted, or I get a headache, or I can feel it. Some people say I can feel it in my fists. However it is to you, and just become very aware of the physical sensation that you get in that moment. The next thing to do is then to take some time and actually think about other things in your life that have made you feel that same way, and then write them out. So I felt that way when Mrs. Smith in English class made me read and I made a mistake in front of the class. I felt that way when my dad said this. I felt like that. And actually spend some time, maybe spend half an hour, just really trying to think through, calm yourself down and think through as many of those memories as you can, and try and get an idea of what sort of story has been created that makes you feel entitled, or things not good enough for you, whatever it might be. And then once you've done that and you can see some idea of the framework that's been created there, start to then reframe those memories and look at the reality of the memories. So if it is your teacher told you that you're never going to be good enough, okay, so as a 7-year-old, you might have taken that really seriously, and you might have believed, I'm never going to be good enough because my teacher, who was an adult in authority, said this to me. Looking back on that, you might see that she was a stressed out 40-year-old struggling with 30 kids in a class. And it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So you start to reframe it as, oh, my teacher was having a bad day. She wasn't good at her job that day, rather than I'm innately not good enough.
Yeah.
And you start reframing how you view these memories. And, I genuinely believe it is much more powerful doing this with someone else, because like you said, people don't like going to the very painful stuff, and they usually push themselves away from it. So it is quite hard to work through your own most difficult memories.
Yeah, exactly.
However, as a starting point, this will give you an understanding and a framework of how these physical sensations you feel now are connected to things that have happened throughout your life.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a good starting point for anybody. And there are lots of counseling services and therapists. It doesn't have to be, if you're looking to work on this, it doesn't necessarily have to be someone within the poker industry. Lots of students, if you're at university as well, there'll be some kind of mental health care. So I would just say also really look around. That there's probably more available to you than you think there is, if you're willing to reach out. And then as you become more successful, if you're reaching the highest stakes of the game, then typically it's worth investing in someone who also is working in the poker industry, let's say.
Yeah. The journaling also really helps me, and I can recommend. I'm using Klarheit. I have it here. I don't know if you've heard about it.
I haven't seen that, no.
It's just like it's like a calendar, but it has 3 different areas. It has at the beginning at the beginning of the year that kind of forces you to think really deep. So it asks you a couple of questions. Don't want to show that here, of course. You plan ahead for 1 year. What do you want to accomplish in 3 years, 10 years? And then it asks you very deep questions. So let's say now it's 1 year later, I have achieved what I set out to do. What is the most important result that I have achieved? So you really have to think about the milestones along the way. And it's just very practical, very, very practical. And sometimes I sit there, it's like, oh, it's so painful, but painful in a way that I need to think. Yeah. I need to be very honest and to answer all these questions. Then you have monthly reviews. I can show that. So you have every month you have one side as a preview, one side as a review of the previous months. What do I want to have started, completed, stopped, achieved by the end of the month, assuming I've achieved what I set out to do? What is different? What is better now? So it's not just what do you want to achieve, but like, okay, how do you feel? What is better now?
And why?
Yeah, exactly. Like you always have to ask yourself why and which advantages does it have for me? And then instead of, I don't know, going to bed late, I will go to bed early, and you have to clear the way to get there. What are the obstacles? Yeah. And then you have your weekly stuff as well. So big fan of it. I'm using it now for more than 2 years. Klarheit. It's a German company, but it also exists in English.
And like you say, this is there is a lot of work people can do on their own, and I think it's important to point that out. Start doing the work now. Don't wait until you're successful to then decide to work on your mindset. It will be much easier to become successful if you start working on your mindset in every way prior to that time.
And I've also met a lot of very successful people that have neglected that and their entire life just for the performance, for the success. But then once they reach that pinnacle, kind of like as I did, I wasn't necessarily for a very long time paying attention to my mental health. I started meditating very late in my journey, I would say. I was already about to retire from grinding sit and goes full time, but I've realized the success is not that great as I expected it to be. And
this theme comes up with so many clients.
Yeah.
That there are a lot of people who feel that there's an amount of money or a score in some way that means everything's everything's better. Yeah, when I hit $1 million, everything's better in my life. I promise you, it's not better.
Yeah.
When you hit a certain financial goal, what it does is it gives you the freedom to work on yourself and find out what you really enjoy in life.
Yeah.
But that's all it does is give you that freedom and that space to find out what will really make you happy. But the money, from what I've seen, and I've worked with some very, very, very wealthy people, the money on its own doesn't create happiness.
Yeah, exactly. It's just another tool that allows you to. It makes things a little easier, but at the end of the day, you still gotta go through a very painful process very often. Not necessarily physically painful, but emotionally. I don't want to scare people. It's like, oh, it's gonna be so painful. It might be a little painful in the moment, but afterwards the rewards are pretty big, and so I can highly recommend that. And the journaling, I guess, or this bringing what you recommended, it's not just a one-time thing, right? So you have to do that consistently, right? Taking yourself the time, 10, 20, 30 minutes afterwards, trying to identify where are these physical feelings in your body.
So where's it coming from? So what's the root cause of this? And then over time, as you start to train yourself, the things that this is coming, as you reframe those memories by going back to them and change them, then that's going to reduce the triggers and reduce the pain.
Yeah. Do you have some sort of program you can recommend for our listeners, for our viewers, some sort of class apart from your private students, or are you exclusively, Primed Mind? I can highly recommend that.
So we have Prime Mind, then I have a mindset course as well. that I run on Run It Once.
Hmm.
And then there are lots of good books out there on meditation and understanding yourself and working through these types of issues. I mean, poker specific. Yeah, as I say, obviously the course that I created on Run It Once, I would recommend, because the private sessions aren't going to work for everyone. They don't make sense for most players to work with me. And then I've also been training up other hypnotherapists, a couple of whom are also former professional poker players, to work in the industry as well, so that there's going to be more availability for players who want to work on their mindset using hypnotherapy at price levels that make more sense.
Yeah. I honestly think that doing some meditation, and very often the content I'm creating, the topics I talk on YouTube, or what I see during my meditations, because I have the space and I have the clarity that, I should talk about this, or I should make a video about this. And that's usually where you enter this flow state where you get a lot of ideas, inspiration that you can then put into practice and create some very good work or art or whatever it is. And I think even in poker, I had, let's say, the biggest exploits I'm making are coming from those moments when I'm just with myself and I let all the shit out of my mind that constantly shatters down onto my head, into my mind, and then I give it 20-30 minutes, just the freedom, the space, and then all the ideas and the inspiration has the space to come up. And I was like, oh yeah, actually, you know what, like, you should be looking into these sports. People recently haven't been really doing X, Y, that, so let's make ABC as an exploit.
Yeah, I mean, I believe flow states are really almost the point of living. I think if we think back to the moments in life we enjoy the most and that we look back on so fondly, it's usually when we're in a flow state of one kind or another and we're absolutely immersed in the thing that we're doing. So whether that's for a poker player, like you say, being in that zone where you and the computer are there and everything else ceases to exist, and you're just in this zone of just all that exists is poker, and you make the right decision. Or in business, I'll have businessmen talk about it. Obviously, athletes, they're always looking for that flow state. And even in my case, there'll be sessions where I'll do a session and I'll feel like I'm in a flow state for the entire session. And that will be my version of that same feeling. And I believe that that's something that we can learn to increase the number of times that happens, and that it's a learned skill rather than it necessarily being something that only happens randomly. So when you look at the way that you're preparing, the way that you set yourself up prior to playing, so if you're utilizing meditation or you're using prime mind before you play, creating that space between your real life and poker so that you can start to get yourself in that zone, making sure that you've set your goals in your mind, your intentions for the session, making sure that you're not hungry or thirsty, and that you've been exercising well enough that you have good energy for the entire session. All of these small things come together and increase the likelihood of you hitting that flow state more frequently throughout sessions. And I think that should be the aim for poker players, and really anyone in any industry, is the more time you can spend in flow, the more successful you're going to be.
For most people, it's very random. Just sometimes it happens, and then like, I'm in the flow, I need to get all the work done. But you can actually be in charge, or at least increase the chances that it will appear more often. And what I realized, that most people, or that a big fallacy is that, let's say people have an issue and then they do something like a meditation and it's like, oh, it's not gone, or it doesn't help. But I do believe, at least the way it works for me, is that for whatever reason I might slip into my B or C game. Usually it happens because 7-14 days before, my routines weren't so ideal as they're supposed to. Maybe less meditations, less sleep or worse sleep, worse diet, not exercising enough. So basically all these routines that help to put you in a better state and increase the chance of flow state, it's a constant process. And then it's not just a one-time thing. And usually when you do it well, you're not going to necessarily recognize that it's so much better. But where I realize it for myself is when I look back, it's like, yeah, the last 3 weeks I've been playing my A game, I feel good, then I know it works.
Yeah.
Right? So most people always think they do it and then magically they turn into Thor or Captain America, or they expect these godlike I don't know, being invulnerable and seeing everything and solving everything, but it's not how it works.
It's like you say, it's this incremental improvement.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you notice that you pay for this stretch of time and you're doing everything right. What then usually happens is the player wins a lot of money over that period, and then they don't bother to do their exercise, they don't bother to do their meditation, they're feeling a bit comfortable, they take a vacation, and then we go through this cycle again and it doesn't happen straight away. So they stop doing those things, and for the first week or two it doesn't have a big impact, they're still playing pretty well. But when we get 3 weeks, 4 weeks of them being out of their routine, then they start wondering why they can't hit the flow state again. And that's a theme that I've seen show itself year after year with poker players. Is everything goes right, they make a lot of money, things start going wrong, and say, okay, what's changed? And then they give me a list of all the things they stopped doing. And, okay, change them back and let's see what happens.
Pets recommended in the last episode we had, whenever he has a good day, a winning day, and he usually has a routine where he analyzes 10 hands or he reviews 10 spots after a session, or he spends 20 minutes or 25 minutes just to cool down reviewing a couple of spots. He says when he has a good session, he makes 5 or 10 minutes or extends it by 5 or 10 minutes. That helps you. Just because you had a good session doesn't mean you have to work less, but he understands that our mind likes to trick us, or ego likes to trick us, thinking, well, you perform good, so I'm great now. I don't need to put in the work anymore. So it really helps him to stay that humble. And that was it's so simple. But I found it very
everyone feels the same way. Everyone does the same thing. We start winning and we think we're awesome. And we want an excuse to not have to do hard work. And unfortunately, hard work and good play is connected.
And I've also seen that with our business, that when things started going well, that now we have solved it. We know how it works. We know how to grow. But the algorithm change from week to week or month to month. The marketing changes. The ads change. It's like everything changes, and also the way people consume content. You have to improve your content. You have to try different formats. It's always where you can't lean back. However, what do you think? How do you think about this chase of trying always to adapt, but then on the other side also making sure you're not freaking out, you're not stressing out yourself that, I missed a new trend, I always have to fix myself, I always have to optimize, striving for that perfectionism. How do you think you can maintain that balance between always being open and seeing change and adapting, but on the other side not stressing too much about it?
I think that's where it helps a lot, having a team around you who's good, or at least mentors who you can talk to, and just double check yourself with a third party in those moments. I think what I've seen that's quite interesting when I'm working with businesses and they go through different growth levels, what takes you to $1 million a year isn't the same system as what then takes you to $10 million a year, which again isn't the same system that takes you to $50 or $100 million a year for a company. And you sort of see these plateaus that people get stuck on because they're trying the same thing and they actually have to restructure the whole way their business works if they want to take that next level up. So yeah, it's definitely been interesting to see that happening. And then in terms of being aware yourself, trying to think, is this coming from a place of fear, or is this coming from a place of sort of optimism, positivity, that there is actually something for me to do here that's going to improve our business.
Yeah.
You do definitely see people who are grasping at straws. Even more so, I think, when people are trying to find what business that they want to go into. And there'll be some people you'll speak to, and every time you talk to them, they're trying a different business or a different industry. The poker analogy for this is some guys who will switch from game type to game type to game type to game type, as if they're going to find the one game that they can just crush, and suddenly they're rich because they found this certain spot. And I think if you see a pattern in yourself that you're doing those sorts of things, take a step back and give yourself a length of time to try and become very competent at one thing. Generally, it's difficult to be successful in different areas at the same time. And I think it's especially difficult if you haven't mastered one thing first. So if we talk about the playing the different styles of poker, I would really recommend play one game type first, become as good as you feel you can get at that game type, and then start adding other game types. That's when I see players actually doing well, playing the different games.
Yeah.
What I don't see players doing well is when they're starting out, they're an beginner or intermediate player, and I'll ask them what they play. So what games do you play? Oh, I play PLO, I play mixed games, and I play cash, and I play MTTs. I'm like, okay, if you're a beginner, there is no way that you're going to be great at all of the games. It's very unlikely that you're a winner in the games you're playing in. I would just say, take a step back, look at your behavior, look at how many different things you're trying at the same time, and then ask yourself, why aren't you giving one area 100% effort? Is it to protect your ego?
Yeah.
Because you'll be more comfortable having an excuse for failing.
Yeah.
Because and again, that shows up an awful lot, is the reason they're trying lots of games is because if they try one and fail, they're going to feel terrible about it. But if they try 10 and fail, then they have an excuse. And it's these sorts of things in the background that you want to be aware of and looking out for.
Yeah. How do you make sure that you don't fall into the trap of the sunk cost fallacy? Because for some players, also applies in real life, as many things do in poker, that you get too invested. When do you recognize, all right, probably it's time to step back, maybe even stop poker or play a different format, where some players think, oh, I invested that much, I tried for so long, I have to keep going. I invested so much money in courses or coachings, whatever, that you avoid the sunk cost fallacy?
It's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think this is where a network and honest mentors and honest coaches, that you need to be talking to other people, and you need to find out really where you are and what your potential is. Not everyone is going to succeed in poker. Most people aren't going to succeed in poker. That's the truth of it. So if you're finding yourself if you've been playing for years and years, and you've been genuinely doing all of the study, and you're doing all of the other lifestyle things that we're talking about, and you're still losing, it really is worth questioning if it's a game for you, or if perhaps you should be playing poker for fun and spending more time working hard on something else.
Or at least change maybe the way you've been approaching it, resolving some issues.
Something's wrong. Something's wrong. If you've played for years and years and you're genuinely doing the amount of study that you should be doing, there's something not right if you can't beat, certainly if it's the very lowest stakes, if you're still struggling. And also just be aware of, I think with poker players, there is a truth. If you are good at poker, you're highly intelligent and you're doing something incredibly difficult. There is always a chance you actually have a better return on investment outside of poker. There are a lot of people who, if they were in the business world and they were putting in the same level of effort in business that they put into beating, perhaps mid stakes at poker, which is very, very difficult. Very few people do it. Be aware you do have that potential in other parts of life. to take us down and take all of those things you learned from poker, the discipline, the study, the focus, and you can apply that to something else where it's not as competitive as poker, and you might find that you can be really successful.
Yeah. I've seen of course, I can only speak from my circle of friends, that I also have seen some who succeeded in poker, but it kind of also, if you're not paying attention, it might make you delusional, because that you think, oh, you're also going to crush a business, and they're actually not applying the same level of patience and the same level of dedication as they might have applied in poker, and then they put their money just in startups or build their own businesses, and then they fail and they actually lose a lot of money. Whereas when I think about it, I have a couple of friends who did quite well for some time, then started struggling, didn't have the energy anymore to persist, and they retired from poker and become incredibly successful in other areas in business, as lawyers, as financial accountants. And do you think might there be a pattern that it also
So I think the pattern is, and we see it from businessmen moving to poker as well, if you're very successful, there's always, I think, a bit of a risk of almost jumping in at the higher stakes of business.
Bankroll management, so to speak, for business is very important.
Yeah. So, it's one thing if you're, when we start in poker, nearly everyone who's successful starts from the bottom and grinds their way up.
Yeah.
We don't see that many businessmen who suddenly start playing in high stakes games and then become the best player in the world. Typically, people have ground their way up from the bottom and they've learned their lessons, and then they know what they're doing when they reach the top. And I think there's the same risk. Like you're saying, lots of people move over from poker, and they buy a company, or they go in at CEO level of a company without having the experience of being a CEO previously.
Makes sense.
And I think it is that the sort of learning process is really important. But just be aware, if you have done really well at poker, the learning process isn't necessarily going to be years and years and years for you to reach that stage, but you shouldn't be, I would think, coming in at the top level of a company. You should be, even if it's just working with some other successful startups or entrepreneurs first, learning the ropes, making sure that you don't make the mistakes that they've made. It's a lot easier to pay to learn from other people's mistakes than make the mistakes yourself, because it's really expensive in business.
That's true. I would have said, however, I find it's a grind. It's a grind to find the right people, whether it's mentors and friends. And not sure how it is with you, but one of the most common questions I receive, or let's call it actually excuses. Hey, Ben, they ask for free coaching or free mentoring. Can you help me out? I don't have the people in my life. I don't have poker friends. And you see that this victimhood mentality, but usually my response is always, it's 220. You have so many opportunities to join Discord forums, training platforms, and you don't need to spend money. Give, as you did in your gym. I really like the analogy, and just be there providing help. Like, even if you have no experience, you have something to offer, even if it's just mental support, cheering people up. But I know it's easy to say, I don't have anything to offer. I don't find friends, so there's nothing I can do. Well, okay, then don't expect great results. And building up this circle of warriors that support you, that help you, whether it's mentors and friends, it is also a grind. You will also meet people that are not so beneficial for you, and you have to let go of them and then just do user-to-user coachings. And if you're someone who's very helpful and you provide feedback onto others, magical things can happen, and you basically attract what you need. And listen, there's no excuse, and it might take a year that you're active in a Discord forum, you respond to hands, you post hands yourself, you cheer people up, and basically you are the person that you would like to attract. It's going to take some time. And that's why I also asked you at the beginning of our session today, of our podcast, asking you about the retreat, because I know this is something you need to maintain. Just because right now I have a great coach you as a mental coach, and I have some other mentors as well, and I have poker buddies, but they're also going to change, and you never know, they might not be suitable at some point. That you might decide in 1 year, I'm not going to do mental coachings anymore, right?
Yeah.
So
they need other options.
I don't want to be dependent on your life. So I would like to broaden my horizon. It's not that I look for people always trying to replace them, but if there is some sort of, I don't know, situation in your life going on, I would like also to have other people I can reach out to. So what people misunderstand is, oh, I have my circle and it's always going to be the same circle.
Yeah.
But it's not, right?
And I think that's, again, it's like the journey with money. When we're saying money won't solve all of your problems at a certain level. The same thing, a social network, social circle, it will have to continually evolve as you grow.
Yeah.
For the people out there who are saying, I can't make friends, I can't meet poker players, you really have to define it as it's a skill. You're going to have to improve that. And it's one of the skills that makes you successful in poker. And I would argue that past a certain stage of the game, your ability to network and make friends actually probably becomes the most valuable skill that you can have. So your ability to get invited to, once you become a high stakes cash game player, the ability to be likable enough and build a network to be invited to private games is by far the highest EV that you can gain. And, your technical ability, it's not going to be very relevant. What's relevant is whether people like you and whether you're trustworthy and whether you get those invites, because that's where the money is. The same when it comes to, if you're playing in MTTs, you'll need that network of strong players around you, because the game does move so quickly, and 10 minds will do better than one mind when it comes to learning and improving yourself as a player. So, if you are one of the people who's desperate to sort of get some coaching and improve themselves because they can't make a network, as Ben said, there's so many options available on the internet, and you don't have the excuse, unfortunately. You have to just keep grinding away at the forums, go to live events. If there's a live event in your city, go and talk to as many people as you can. If anxiety is an issue, see that as a challenge, something for you to work on, and that's where your self-improvement should be. It might be more important than you're working on your technical study. If you can improve the way that you socialize and how confident you feel socially, that may actually provide more EV for you. Certainly, possibly in poker, but certainly in everyday life. That's going to be a huge skill for you to work on.
Yeah, and I'm not saying always try to constantly replace your friends, and I think you should have your inner circle of friends. That's probably going to be you have very intense and a very long relationship with, but then outside of that, always trying to stay open and look for new input and maybe different perspective that others have and you might not have because you're so blind and you're so biased on your own.
And like I said, the good advice at one level, as you progress, might not necessarily be good advice anymore.
For sure.
There are certainly levels in business where it changes, and people need mentors who have had that experience and know the answers. So keeping that open mind to growing your network is so important.
True. There was someone, if we move a little bit back to the topic we had earlier, a very good question that I received. How does a person move on from the bully that happened in the early stage of his life, and how do you set your mind to really forgive the bullies, let it go, and just move on to the next chapter of your life without wanting some kind of revenge?
Okay. There are a few things. One is see that it wasn't life and death because you did survive. The child you always processes being threatened as life and death situation. That's why the emotions are so high. That's why the adrenaline's so high. Nearly everyone's experienced bullying of some nature. So you'll be aware of those feelings. So you want to process that and sort of picture your younger self, tell your younger self that it's okay, that he's safe, those sorts of things. And then, I really believe in the saying, hurt people hurt people. So that bully, if someone has to lash out to feel strong and be mean to feel strong, there's also very likely something else going in that child's life that's making them respond that way.
Yeah.
And it's unlikely they're a particularly happy person, even if they seemed it. If they seemed confident, if they're getting their confidence from trying to make other people miserable, there's something else going on. So I would see it as, they were a part in your journey, you're a part in their journey. Just see it as leave them be and focus on what is the best that you can do today moving forward. And the best thing you can do today to move forward in your life isn't going to be taking revenge on someone who bullied you when you were 12. That's never going to be the most positive thing that you can do with your time today. So I would focus on all of those things. If it's a real struggle, like a day-to-day struggle, then seek professional help. Work with a counselor on this. There's something to be said for seeing, people will quite happily invest in lots and lots of things, but your mental health and happiness, I would say, a lot of people struggle to invest in their mental health. They see it as a strange thing to want to put money into. But if something's going to improve your happiness and you know that it's, bullying issues are something that are holding you back, then I would just highly recommend you put the effort in, find someone to help you and work through that. So good luck with that.
Yeah. And maybe it helps to also understand that you mean something to them in a sense of that you're somewhat of a threat to them. If they don't care about you, then they wouldn't bully you, right? I mean, if you provide online content, I don't want to say it's bullying because it doesn't impact me that much that I'm worrying about a day-to-day basis. But if I receive a mean message or a mean comment, usually I understand that, all right, I'm some sort of threat to them. And they have to fight that by making a mean comment. If they wouldn't care about, if I'm a meaningless person, they wouldn't write that. So I must be doing something that triggers something into them. And very often I'm a threat to that person. Or I'm a threat to their belief system. I'm a threat to the way they see the world, and they have to fight that, or personally to them. Of course, I know I'm not saying anything. I'm not attacking anyone, or I'm not being disrespectful. So it's more often a problem they have, and it's then as you mentioned, and now it makes click in my. I'm just reframing it. And it actually gives me a lot of power because I know I'm doing something right. So there are people that are now giving me their attention, but unfortunately their attention is being mean, being rude, being disrespectful. And I know, all right, I'm doing something right. And maybe this helps him also to see that from that perspective.
And also, if you think about that, anyone who's successful is going to be triggering people who aren't successful. Because, they want it to be luck. They want it that it wasn't hard work. That people are doing well. And I think the work that you do, showing people how they can improve in poker can be very triggering because it shows people what they don't know. And from my side, my work can be very triggering when I do these interviews because I'm saying that you can overcome your past and you can live a better life. And for the people who haven't overcome their past and they're struggling with these big emotions, that can be painful to hear that they haven't done the work yet. So some people would rather believe that the work doesn't exist than, and that's where the fight back will come at this sort of, mindset coaching and self-development work. So as I say, just if you can try and view it with kindness, and it's a shame they feel that way or had to act that way. But again, just part of their journey.
What I realized, what a lot of poker players also struggle with, is the trying to play this perfect strategy, let's call it GTO, trying to always be balanced so they can not get exploited, even though they are missing out on a lot of very, very good spots. And I've seen similar patterns in my own life and in business where you have this blueprint, let's call it GTO for business, GTO for life. You don't only have it in poker, right? You always have some sort of opponents, competitors, whatever it is. What would you recommend that people try to see the circumstances they're in, and you make the proper adjustments. You see the situation like, all right, I know this is how it's supposed to work in theory, but I got to do something different because it's a different situation. That's a very unique, I have my own problems, different industry, different poker game, whatever it is. How do people internalize this kind of trait or routines, or however you want to call it?
I like to describe things. I believe that most things are arts rather than sciences.
I'm sorry, what?
Are arts
okay.
rather than sciences. So there's not always binary right and wrong decisions, because there are too many factors at play for us to be able to say something is 100% right or something is 100% wrong. There's always going to be a shade of gray. And a lot of people, certainly in the poker world, they want it to be that it's black and white. If I do everything, if I play my standard way, then I have won. And because you're dealing with the psychology of the players you're playing against, and we don't have all of the data, so we can't say 100% what's right and what's wrong. And I think that quest for perfectionism, like you said, it causes a lot of pain. It causes a lot of self-hate when people make what they feel are mistakes. And a lot of the time it's uncalled for, and it's costing them a lot of money. So for me personally, in my work, I view it as an art, not a science. There's a science to it, but the way I navigate my sessions, each session is going to be different. And if I tried to put a blueprint on it and every session was exactly the same, I don't believe it would be as effective. And I think that's the same for poker players. That's the same for business. I think it's a case of trying to get yourself into that flow state, and then afterwards, when you make the mistake, great book, Mindset by Dweck, have the growth mindset rather than the fixed mindset. So it's not that you failed, it's that you've learned something that you can then adjust as you move forward. And it's just a journey of constant learning, where when you've made mistakes, they're just part of that process of getting better. They're not a failure that you have to punish yourself for. And then that makes mistakes a lot less scary, a lot less stressful, and you can try new things without being so intimidated by. So just book recommendation if you haven't read it.
How's it called?
It's called Mindset by Carol Dweck.
Okay.
And it's about fixed versus growth mindsets. But if this is something that you really struggle with, the idea of perfectionism, then that book's a great starting point.
It's in general with books, it's like whether you run a GTO solve in poker, or it's a book that you read that I read for personal development or business. It's very, and I would consider myself as well, that it's very easy to think, oh, I'm going to copy this one-to-one. I'm just going to apply this theory knowledge onto my business. But very often I only take 5 or 10% out of it that inspired me, that I can try. And the rest is me just adjusting. And the same, I see it in poker as well, that it helps you, the GTO helps you to understand what's going on, but it doesn't really teach you poker. You got to do the remaining 90-80% on the table yourself, right? It's like you need to understand that GTO only teaches you the theory. It's like reading a book, but it doesn't teach you poker. Like, okay, this is a very bold statement, but to get my point straight. And this is something I find incredibly challenging, even though I'm aware of it. And also, you have one meditation in the Primed Mind app where that was really helpful for me. It was called Knowing When You're Beaten. And just your voice, okay, you're beat, be the casino, fold the hand, don't pay them out. And this is not something where I want to be in the state, in the mind of, but I'm supposed to defend you, even though I know I'm beaten, right? So I try to deviate from this perfect theoretical play and, okay, what makes the most sense in practice? And sometimes I'm just sitting there in silence. I always try to have the balance between guided meditation and just sitting there for 15 minutes and really visualizing those moments and how I picture myself making the decisions. What's my posture? What's my breathing? And really visualizing how I click on the fold button, and really prepares me to be in that state. When I'm slacking,
that's when the mistake's going to happen.
Yeah, slip into that. All right, GTO, call, and you're always beaten, and that really helps.
And you feel you can justify it.
Exactly.
That's the problem. It's like, well, but the program told me I had to do that, and it's just such an enormous edge if you can take control of that. And those times that you're beaten, you fold anyway. See the fold as a weapon rather than seeing it as a passive action or a negative action. I think that'd be really powerful.
I think trying to find these excuses we have to justify our wrong decisions. I've had many students when they were screen recording their sessions. You can't believe the enormous amounts of time people were snap acting. Why? When we reviewed, they said, I didn't have much time to make my decision. It's like, if you would have thought about it, right, 20, 30 seconds, you would have might come to a different solution. But when you snap act, you can say, well, I didn't have that much time. That was insane to me. I was like, you have at least 20 seconds time bank. Take your time. It's like, bluff catcher, call. Bluff catcher, call.
Yeah.
But
it means they don't have to face the difficult decision.
Exactly. It would be too painful.
Yeah, exactly. It's just if you can snap act, like you say, you have the excuse. If you give yourself the moment, then you're going to actually have to sometimes make those very difficult folds.
Yeah. Or simply to admit that you don't know what to do. So you try to avoid that. You do snap act, and then you can blame that you
just move on.
You move on. Yeah. Exactly. When I started coaching, especially also back then when we had the Coaching for Profit program, wow, I was astonished. We actually, with many students, we didn't only work on theory and how to apply it, but very often, hey, critical moment, take your time, slow down. So simple, but that really opened my eyes.
Changes the way people play.
Yeah, definitely. Last question for today, and then we're gonna wrap it up. I have so much more I actually wanted to talk about, but this is a very broad topic. I think we could talk about it for 10 hours. And what do you think is the most undervalued skill to become successful?
I mean, I feel bad because we've covered this so much today.
Yeah.
But honestly, I believe networking is the key to becoming successful in anything.
Okay.
So building your network, it's just it gives you so many advantages in so many situations. So you get the advantage of learning from other people's mistakes, you get the support from a group, you get opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get. You get criticism from people who hopefully will be able to be honest with you and give you criticism that you can actually apply changes. And I think it's really undervalued in poker, even though, I mention it all the time. I know you mention it. A lot of other coaches mention it as well. But there are a lot of lone wolves out there who they want to beat poker on their own. And I just really think open your mind to how powerful it is. Because at some stage you probably won't be a poker player.
Yeah.
At some stage of your life or career, that networking skill will serve you in absolutely everything you do.
Yeah.
So that would be my main takeaway for people, is really focus on building that, because that's where so much opportunity comes from.
Yeah. I don't know where it comes from, because even if you have a solo sport, let's say swimming or tennis play, they still have a huge team, coaches, physiotherapists. They're working with other players. They're never on their own. I don't know why it's such a big thing in poker. Maybe it's because it's a bit more ego involved, but I don't know.
It's take advantage of the hive mind.
Exactly.
It will change everything if you've been working on it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time. I think that was in 60, 70 minutes, incredible value. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to know more, Primed Mind, you have a free version as well as a paid version. You can definitely check it out. You have a mindset course on Run It Once.
Yeah.
I've been working now with Elliot for quite some time. Can definitely highly recommend his art of coaching, his art of teaching. let us know in the comments if there are any other questions that I might be able to help you with. Thank you so much for taking the time, Elliot. And
Hey man,
by the way,
thanks so
also
much for having me
personally,
on.
thank
Hi,
you so
everyone.
much for the ring.
Oh, the Aura. Yeah,
I'm using
the
it
Aura
now
ring, I tell you.
I'm using it now for more than 2 weeks, and I can really feel the motivation trying to beat my score from the previous day. If you don't know what I'm talking about, guys, I recorded. I'm not sure if it's going to be released after the podcast or before, but there's a video about sleep where I also talk about my take on sleep as a poker player and what I'm doing currently and what has helped me. Thank you for the recommendation. There was Elliot who recommended me, but it's the same.
I'm wearing mine too.
Yeah. Great. Awesome, Elliot.
Cheers, man.